The dark secret behind the Tuskegee Experiment. Imagine trusting your government, trusting doctors who promise to heal you. Now imagine discovering that for 40 years, they deliberately let you suffer and die. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of the Tuskegee Experiment, one of the most unethical medical studies in American history. 600 African American men were told they were receiving free health care. Instead, they became human guinea pigs in a study that would destroy lives, shatter families, and create a legacy of distrust that echoes through generations. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about medical ethics and government accountability. We want to know your thoughts in the comments. How far is too far in the name of science? Let's uncover the dark truth behind Tuskegee. A promise of hope. The year is 1932. America is drowning in the Great Depression. Nowhere is the suffering more acute than in Macon County, Alabama. This rural area, home to the town of Tuskegee, represents one of the poorest regions in the United States. The population is predominantly African American, descendants of enslaved people who worked the cotton fields that still dominate the landscape. Segregation isn't just a policy here. It's woven into every aspect of daily life. The red clay roads turn to thick mud when it rains, making travel nearly impossible. Most families live in wooden shacks without electricity or running water. Children walk miles to segregated schools that operate only a few months each year, closing when cotton needs picking. Healthcare is virtually non-existent for black residents. The nearest hospital that accepts African American patients is hours away, and few can afford the journey, let alone the cost of treatment. In this desperate environment, the United States Public Health Service sees an opportunity. They partner with the Tuskegee Institute, a prestigious black college founded by Booker T. Washington, to conduct a study. The official title is lengthy and clinical, the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male. But the men recruited for this study don't know that name. They don't know they're part of an experiment at all. Instead, they're told they have bad blood, a vague term that can mean anything from anemia to fatigue to syphilis. The doctors promise free medical examinations, free meals on examination days, and free burial insurance. For men who've never seen a doctor in their lives, who watch their neighbors die from preventable diseases, this seems like a miracle. Finally, someone cares about their health. Finally, the government is offering help. 600 men sign up. 399 have syphilis. 201 don't, serving as a control group. None of them understand what they've truly agreed to. The consent forms are vague, written in language designed to obscure rather than inform. Many of the men can't read anyway. They trust the doctors because they have no reason not to. They trust the Tuskegee Institute because it's a black institution, a symbol of progress and education in their community. The study begins with what appears to be genuine care. The men receive physical examinations, blood tests, and x-rays. They're told they're receiving treatment for their bad blood. What they don't know is that these painful spinal taps, disguised as special free treatment, are actually research procedures with no therapeutic value. The doctors aren't trying to cure them. They're documenting the progression of untreated syphilis from infection to death. Dr. Taliaferro Clark, the initial director of the study, believes the research will only last 6 months. He thinks they'll document the disease, provide treatment, and publish their findings. But when funding becomes an issue and the study faces cancellation, something changes. His successor, Dr. Raymond Vonderler, sees a different opportunity. Why end the study when they can observe the full natural progression of the disease? Why treat these men when their suffering can provide valuable scientific data? The decision is made. The Tuskegee study will continue, not for 6 months, not even for 6 years, for 4 decades. The men return to their lives believing they're being cared for. They tell their friends and neighbors about the government doctors who take interest in their health. Some even feel proud to be part of something important, though they don't understand what that something is. They receive certificates of appreciation, making them feel valued and respected in a society that usually offers them neither. Back in Washington, officials justify the study with racist pseudoscience prevalent in that era. They claim African Americans experience syphilis differently than white people. They argue that studying untreated syphilis in black men will provide unique medical insights. These justifications rest on the dehumanizing belief that black bodies are somehow fundamentally different, less valuable, more suitable for experimentation. The stage is set for one of the greatest betrayals in medical history. In Macon County, Alabama, as cotton grows in the fields and the sun beats down on red clay roads, 600 men place their faith in a system that has already decided their lives matter less than the data they can provide. The systematic deception. As the study continues through the 1930s and 40s, a complex web of deception takes shape. At the center of this web is a woman who would become both the face of care and the instrument of betrayal. Her name is Eunice Rivers. Nurse Rivers is an African-American woman, educated at the Tuskegee Institute, respected in her community. She's chosen specifically for this role because the white doctors understand something crucial. These men will never fully trust white medical professionals, but they will trust someone who looks like them, someone who speaks their language, someone who seems to understand their world. Eunice Rivers is brilliant at her job. She drives the dusty roads of Macon County in her car, visiting the men in their homes. She knows their wives, plays with their children, attends their churches. She becomes a fixture in their lives, a symbol of consistency and care. When the men have questions, they ask Nurse Rivers. When they're afraid, she reassures them. When they consider dropping out of the study, she convinces them to stay. What makes her role so tragic is that she genuinely believes she's helping. In her mind, these men would receive no medical care at all without the study. The examinations, the attention, even placebo treatments represent more than they would otherwise have. She tells herself she's doing good work. She doesn't allow herself to question why these men never seem to get better. She doesn't ask why the treatments never seem to cure the bad blood. The treatments themselves are a cruel joke. The men receive aspirin for pain. They receive pink medicine that's nothing more than colored water. They're given iron supplements that do nothing for syphilis. Some receive painful injections that have no therapeutic value whatsoever. The men endure these procedures believing they're being healed, never knowing they're simply being studied. The spinal taps are particularly brutal. The procedure involves inserting a needle into the lower spine to extract cerebrospinal fluid. It's painful, can cause severe headaches, and carries risks of infection. The doctors perform these procedures repeatedly, not to treat the men, but to document how syphilis affects the nervous system. The men are told these are special treatments, the kind that only important patients receive. They feel honored, even as they suffer. Dr. Vondeler and his colleagues develop sophisticated methods to keep the men enrolled. They send official-looking letters on government letterhead. They offer incentives, $25 for participation, free hot meals on examination days, certificates of appreciation. Most importantly, they promise free burial insurance worth $50, a fortune for families who usually can't afford proper funerals. But there's a sinister condition attached to this burial insurance. To receive the benefit, the families must agree to an autopsy. This is the real goal. The doctors want to examine the men's bodies after death, to see what untreated syphilis has done to their hearts, their brains, their bones. The families, grieving and desperate, agree. They don't understand they're providing the final data point in an experiment that killed their loved ones. The web of deception extends beyond Macon County. Dr. Vondeler contacts the state health department, local draft boards, and other physicians in the area. He provides them with a list of names, the men in the study, with a simple request. Do not treat these individuals for syphilis. If they come seeking help, turn them away. If they're drafted for military service, ensure they don't receive the standard syphilis treatment given to other soldiers. This conspiracy of silence works perfectly. When Charlie Pollard tries to see another doctor for his worsening symptoms, he's turned away. When Herman Shaw is drafted during World War II, officials somehow ensure he never receives the syphilis treatment given to other recruits. The men are trapped in an invisible cage, unable to access help even when they seek it, even when help is readily available to others. The study coordinators become increasingly creative in their manipulation. They use the men's faith against them, presenting the study as a blessing from God. They exploit the men's poverty, knowing that free meals and small payments are impossible to refuse. They weaponize the men's trust, building relationships that make questioning or leaving feel like betrayal. Throughout this period, the men's symptoms worsen. Syphilis is a progressive disease. In its late stages, it attacks the cardiovascular system and the nervous system. Men who were strong farmers begin experiencing chest pain and difficulty breathing as the disease damages their hearts. Others develop neurosyphilis, leading to difficulty walking, blindness, dementia, and paralysis. Some become unable to work, plunging their families into even deeper poverty. The wives suffer too. Syphilis is sexually transmitted. Many of the wives contract the disease from their husbands, never knowing they're being infected. Some experience the same progressive symptoms. Others pass the infection to their unborn children, causing congenital syphilis that leads to stillbirths, infant deaths, and lifelong disabilities in surviving children. The tragedy multiplies across generations, yet the study continues. Every 6 months, then annually, the men return for their examinations. They undress in small examination rooms. They answer questions about their symptoms. They receive their pink medicine and their certificates of appreciation. They go home believing they're fortunate to have such attentive medical care. In research papers and medical conferences, the doctors present their findings. They describe the progression of cardiovascular syphilis. They document rates of neurosyphilis. They publish photographs of the men, their faces sometimes visible, their dignity stripped away in the name of science. The medical community accepts these papers without question. No one asks whether the men consented. No one asks whether they're receiving treatment. No one asks because, in this era, the idea that black men deserve informed consent and ethical treatment simply doesn't occur to most white doctors. Now, we want to pause and ask you something important. What do you think about what you've heard so far? Can you imagine being in the position of these men, trusting authorities who are betraying you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and we want to hear from you. The cure they were denied. 1947 marks a turning point in medical history. After years of research and development, penicillin becomes widely recognized as a safe, effective cure for syphilis. A simple course of injections can stop the disease in its tracks, preventing all the devastating complications that come with untreated infection. Hospitals across America begin using penicillin to treat syphilis patients. The cure is real, it's available, and it works. For the men in Tuskegee, this miracle drug might as well not exist. Dr. John Cutler and his colleagues at the Public Health Service face a decision. They've been studying these men for 15 years. The data is valuable. The research is ongoing. If they provide penicillin now, they'll lose the ability to observe the full natural progression of untreated syphilis. The study will end. Years of work will be compromised. They choose to continue. More than that, they actively work to ensure the men never receive penicillin from any source. This isn't passive negligence. It's active, deliberate prevention of treatment. When local health departments begin offering free syphilis treatment programs, the study coordinators intervene. They provide lists of the Tuskegee participants to these programs with explicit instructions. Do not treat these men. When the men somehow learn about new syphilis treatments and ask Nurse Rivers about receiving them, she reassures them that they're already receiving the best possible care through the study. The consequences are devastating. Let's talk about some of the men by name, because they deserve to be remembered as individuals, not just as subjects in an experiment. Charlie Pollard worked hard all his life as a farmer. He was strong, proud, a provider for his family. As the 1950s progress, he begins experiencing severe chest pain. His heart is being destroyed by cardiovascular syphilis. He can't work the long hours anymore. His family's income drops. He asks the study doctors if something is wrong with his heart. They tell him he has bad blood, that he's receiving treatment, that he should continue with the program. They never mention that penicillin could save his life. Charlie survives the study, but with permanent heart damage that leaves him disabled. Herman Shaw is drafted during World War II. He's proud to serve his country. At basic training, soldiers routinely receive treatment for syphilis as a preventive measure. Somehow, Herman's name appears on a list, and he's excluded from this treatment. He serves his country while that country deliberately withholds medical care from him. After the war, he returns to Macon County, still enrolled in the study, still suffering from untreated syphilis. The disease eventually attacks his nervous system. He develops difficulty walking, problems with coordination. Simple tasks become challenging. His quality of life deteriorates year by year. Then there's the story of Freddie Lee Tyson. Freddie is one of the younger participants, enrolled in his 20s. He has his whole life ahead of him. He marries, starts a family, works hard to provide for his children. But as the years pass, he begins losing his vision. Ocular syphilis is destroying his eyes. By his 40s, he's nearly blind. He can't work. His wife becomes the sole provider while he struggles with depression and frustration, unable to understand why the treatments he's receiving aren't helping. The doctors document his progressive blindness in their research notes, clinical observations about the ocular manifestations of late-stage syphilis. They never tell him that penicillin could have prevented this. The wives and children pay a terrible price. Many wives contract syphilis from their husbands. Some develop the same late-stage complications: heart problems, neurological issues, chronic pain. Others fare even worse. Pregnant women with syphilis can pass the infection to their unborn children, causing congenital syphilis. Congenital syphilis is devastating. It can cause miscarriages and stillbirths. Babies born with the infection may have deformities, developmental delays, blindness, deafness. Some appear healthy at birth but develop symptoms months or years later. Bone abnormalities, damaged teeth, neurological problems. The exact number of children affected by the Tuskegee study is unknown, but estimates suggest dozens of babies were born with congenital syphilis or died because their fathers were denied treatment. Imagine being a mother, watching your baby suffer from unexplained health problems, never knowing that your husband's participation in a government health program is the reason your child is sick. Imagine being that husband, proudly participating in what you believe is medical care, unknowingly infecting your wife and children with disease that doctors could easily cure but choose not to. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the study continues. The researchers publish more papers. They present at more conferences. They receive professional recognition for their work on the long-term effects of untreated syphilis. Dr. Sidney Olansky takes over as director and sees no reason to end the study. Neither does his successor, Dr. Donald Rockwell. The civil rights movement transforms America during these decades. African Americans fight for voting rights, for desegregation, for basic human dignity. In Macon County, just miles from where the study participants live, the Freedom Riders face violence for challenging segregation. The world is changing. Ideas about racial equality are evolving. But for the men in the Tuskegee study, nothing changes. They continue their regular visits, continue receiving their placebo treatments, continue suffering from a disease that could be cured with medicine that costs just a few dollars. Some participants died during these years. Their families hold funerals paid for by the study's burial insurance. Then the bodies are transported for autopsies. Government pathologists cut into the corpses, examining the damage caused by decades of untreated syphilis. They photograph the lesions on hearts eaten away by disease. They section brains turned spongy by neurosyphilis. They document everything meticulously. Each autopsy provides a final data point the researchers wanted, the ultimate confirmation of what untreated syphilis does to the human body. The survivors gather at the funerals, comforting the widows, not knowing that they're looking at their own futures. They return to their homes, to their families, to their lives. They take their pink medicine. They display their certificates of appreciation on their walls. They believe they're fortunate to be part of this special program. Before we continue, we want to take a moment to thank you for staying with us through this difficult story. We know this content isn't easy to hear, but it's important. The truth matters. History matters. And understanding what happened at Tuskegee matters if we want to prevent anything like it from happening again. The most shocking revelations are still ahead, so please keep watching. The scandal explodes. The year is 1966. A young investigator named Peter Buxton starts working for the Public Health Service in San Francisco. He's idealistic, committed to public health, Proud to work for the government, during his orientation, he learns about various ongoing studies and programs. One of them catches his attention, the Tuskegee Study. As Buxton reads the files, he becomes increasingly disturbed. The study began in 1932. It's now 1966. These men have been observed for 34 years without treatment. Penicillin has been available for nearly 20 years. The study's stated purpose is to observe the natural progression of untreated syphilis, but there's nothing natural about deliberately withholding a known cure. The ethical problems seem obvious to Buxton. He can't understand why the study is still continuing. He raises his concerns with his supervisors. Their response shocks him. They see no problem with the study. They explain that these are poor, uneducated black men who would never have received treatment anyway. They argue that the scientific value of the data outweighs any ethical concerns. They tell Buxton that he doesn't understand the bigger picture, that he's too young and inexperienced to appreciate the importance of this research. Buxton doesn't give up. Over the next several years, he continues pushing for the study to be terminated and for the remaining participants to receive treatment. He writes memos. He attends meetings. He makes formal complaints. Every time he's dismissed, the study has powerful defenders within the public health service. It's been running for decades. Papers have been published. Careers have been built on this research. Nobody wants to admit that it might be unethical. By 1968, Buxton realizes that internal channels won't work. The system is protecting itself. He begins to consider going public, but he hesitates. Whistleblowing could end his career. He could face legal consequences for revealing confidential government information. He wrestles with this decision for years. Meanwhile, in Macon County, the study continues. More men die. More autopsies are performed. More data is collected. The participants, now elderly, continue to trust a program that has been part of their lives for 40 years. Finally, in 1972, Peter Buxton makes his decision. He contacts Edith Lederer, a reporter he knows. She's interested, but wants verification. Buxton then reaches out to Jean Heller, a reporter for the Associated Press. Heller immediately recognizes the significance of the story. She begins investigating, confirming details, seeking additional sources. On July 25, 1972, Jean Heller's story breaks nationally. The Associated Press distributes it to newspapers across the country. The New York Times runs on front page, syphilis victims in U.S. study went untreated for 40 years. The reaction is immediate and explosive. Americans are horrified. The study sounds like something from Nazi Germany, not something the United States government would do. Members of Congress receive thousands of letters from outraged constituents. Civil rights organizations demand accountability. Medical ethicists condemn the study as a profound violation of basic human rights. Senator Edward Kennedy convenes hearings. On February 21st and March 2nd of 1973, the Senate Subcommittee on Health meets to investigate. Government officials are called to testify. They try to defend the study, arguing that it was considered ethical when it began in 1932, that standards have changed over time. This defense falls flat. Even by 1932 standards, the deception and lack of informed consent were problematic, and the decision to continue after penicillin became available in the 1940s was indefensible by any era standards. The hearings bring another crucial revelation. The study had been reviewed multiple times over the decades. In 1969, a panel of doctors and public health officials had examined the study to determine whether it should continue. They decided it should. Even in 1969, with civil rights laws in place, with changing attitudes about race and medical ethics, these officials saw no problem with continuing to observe black men dying from a treatable disease. During the hearings, some of the survivors testify. These elderly men, some now using canes or wheelchairs due to the disease's effects on their nervous systems, tell their stories to the nation. They describe how they trusted the government, how they believed they were receiving treatment, how they never knew they had syphilis or that it was curable. Charlie Pollard speaks about his heart problems, about watching his health deteriorate while believing he was being treated. Herman Shaw describes the difficulty of living with late-stage syphilis effects, the loss of dignity. the frustration of a body that no longer works properly. Their testimonies are heartbreaking and damning. The Public Health Service finally ends the Tuskegee study in October 1972. The survivors receive treatment at last, though for many, it's too late. The damage is done. Penicillin can kill the bacteria, but it can't repair hearts destroyed by cardiovascular syphilis. It can't restore vision lost to ocular syphilis. It can't reverse neurological damage from neurosyphilis. The men receive medicine that should have been given 40 years earlier, when it could save them from decades of suffering. The legal consequences follow. In 1973, attorney Fred Gray files a class action lawsuit on behalf of the participants. Gray is a civil rights lawyer who previously represented Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. He argues for significant damages, for recognition of the profound harm done. The case is settled out of court in 1974. The government agrees to pay $9 million. The living participants each receive $37,500. The families of deceased participants receive $15,000. It's a substantial settlement by 1970 standards. But can any amount of money compensate for 40 years of preventable suffering? The settlement also includes lifetime medical benefits for all participants, their wives, and their children. The government will finally provide the health care it should have provided from the beginning. This benefit continues to this day for the few remaining survivors and affected family members. The scandal forces America to confront uncomfortable truths. How could this happen? How could government doctors deliberately harm people they were supposed to help? How could this continue for 40 years, through multiple administrations, reviewed by numerous officials, without anyone stopping it? The answer is complex and disturbing. It happened because the victims were black men in the segregated South. It happened because racism allowed white doctors to see these men as less than fully human, as suitable subjects for experimentation in ways white patients never would be. It happened because a system designed to protect research subjects didn't exist. It happened because scientific curiosity was valued more than human welfare. The Tuskegee study becomes a turning point in medical ethics. It demonstrates why informed consent is essential. It shows why independent oversight of human research is necessary. It proves that good intentions and scientific goals don't justify harmful experiments on vulnerable populations. The legacy of distrust. The Tuskegee study officially ends in 1972, but its effects ripple forward through decades, shaping attitudes, policies, and lives in ways that continue to this day. In the immediate aftermath, Congress takes action. In 1974, lawmakers passed the National Research Act, creating the National Commission for Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. This commission develops the Belmont Report, published in 1979, which establishes 3 fundamental ethical principles for research involving human subjects: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. These principles seem obvious now, but the Tuskegee study proved they couldn't be taken for granted. Respect for persons means researchers must treat participants as autonomous agents capable of making informed decisions. Beneficence means researchers must maximize benefits and minimize harm. Justice means the benefits and burdens of research must be fairly distributed. The Tuskegee study violated all 3 principles catastrophically. The Belmont Report leads to the creation of institutional review boards, or IRBs. Every research institution must now have an IRB that reviews and monitors studies involving human subjects. These boards include community members, not just researchers, ensuring that ordinary people have a voice in determining what research is ethical. Informed consent becomes mandatory, not optional. Participants must be told the purpose of a study, its risks and benefits, and their right to withdraw at any time. These protections exist because of Tuskegee. Every time a researcher completes an ethics training module, every time an IRB reviews a study protocol, every time a participant signs an informed consent form, they're engaging with a system built on the painful lessons of what happened in Macon County, Alabama. But institutional reforms don't erase the human cost. The survivors of the Tuskegee study live with its consequences for the rest of their lives. Charlie Pollard survives until 2005, but his damaged heart affects his quality of life for decades. Herman Shaw lives until 2004, dealing with the neurological effects of late-stage syphilis. The last known survivor, Ernest Hendon, dies in 2004 at age 96. Their families carry trauma across generations. Children who were born with congenital syphilis face lifelong health challenges. Grandchildren grow up hearing stories about how the government betrayed their grandfathers. The financial impact of decades of preventable illness affects family wealth and opportunities. Education is interrupted when parents can't work. Homes are lost when medical expenses overwhelm limited incomes. The ripple effects touch countless lives. Perhaps the most profound legacy of Tuskegee is the deep, justified mistrust it created within the African American community toward the medical establishment and government health programs. This mistrust didn't begin with Tuskegee, but the study confirmed and amplified existing suspicions rooted in a long history of medical racism. Studies conducted after Tuskegee's exposure consistently show that African Americans are less likely to trust doctors, less likely to participate in clinical trials, and more likely to refuse recommended medical treatments compared to white Americans. This mistrust has real health consequences. When people avoid medical care due to fear and distrust, they die from preventable and treatable diseases. The AIDS epidemic of the 1980s and 90s illustrates this legacy. Conspiracy theories circulated in black communities suggesting that AIDS was created by the government to kill black people. To many white Americans, these theories seem paranoid and irrational. But to African Americans who knew about Tuskegee, who remembered that the government had indeed conducted a deadly experiment on black men, such theories didn't seem far-fetched at all. If it happened once, couldn't it happen again? This mistrust persists into the 21st century. During the COVID-19 pandemic, African Americans showed higher rates of vaccine hesitancy compared to other groups. Public health officials struggled to understand why their messages weren't resonating in black communities. The answer, in part, was Tuskegee. When people remember that the government once told black men they were receiving health care while actually letting them die for research purposes, it becomes harder to trust government assurances about vaccine safety. Researchers studying health disparities consistently find that historical traumas like Tuskegee contribute to worse health outcomes in African American communities. The mistrust leads to later diagnoses, less aggressive treatment, and lower participation in preventive care. It's a bitter irony. A study supposedly conducted to understand disease in black populations has made it harder to provide effective health care to those same communities. Disparities. When new controversies arise about research ethics or healthcare access, people invoke Tuskegee as a warning and a reminder. The study has entered the cultural consciousness as shorthand for medical exploitation and the importance of informed consent. But remembering isn't enough. The legacy of Tuskegee challenges us to ask difficult questions. How do we rebuild trust between communities and healthcare systems? How do we ensure that ethical review processes actually protect vulnerable participants? How do we address the ongoing health disparities that reflect current injustices, not just historical ones? The answers require more than policy changes. They require honest acknowledgement of how racism has operated within medicine and science. They require healthcare systems to actively work to earn trust rather than simply expecting it. They require increasing diversity within medical professions so that healthcare providers better reflect the communities they serve. The Tuskegee study stands as a permanent reminder that medical ethics aren't abstract principles. They're about real people, real families, real suffering. They're about recognizing the full humanity of every person, regardless of race, class, or education level. They're about understanding that no scientific goal, however worthy, justifies treating human beings as mere objects of study. The 400 men who participated in the Tuskegee study deserve to be remembered not just as victims, but as people. They were fathers and husbands, farmers and veterans, neighbors and friends. They worked hard, loved their families, trusted their doctors, and believed in the promise of health care that never came. Their suffering and their stories have changed American medicine forever. That's a heavy legacy for anyone to carry, but their sacrifice has saved countless lives by making medical research more ethical and more humane. The 600 men who were part of this study, the wives who were infected, the children who were born with congenital syphilis, they all paid an unconscionable price. But their story ensures that future generations of patients and research participants have protections that didn't exist before. That's not redemption. Nothing can redeem what was done, but it is meaning, however painful, drawn from senseless suffering. So what do you think? How do we move forward from this dark chapter in American history? How can the medical community continue to rebuild trust with communities that have every reason to be suspicious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation about justice, ethics, and healthcare. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it taught you something you didn't know, please subscribe to our channel. We're committed to uncovering important stories from history that continue to shape our world today. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. And before you go, check out our next recommended video where we explore another powerful story that will challenge what you thought you knew about American history. Thank you for watching, for learning, and for caring about these stories that must never be forgotten.